My mantra has always been about making games that are worthy of existing, if that's too blunt to say. Meaning, I sometimes question, like, does this game need to exist? Is this game doing anything new or different, offering any new experiences or something? I make games that offer new experiences.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another awesome episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. I am your host, Andrew Lowen, and I am joined as always by Sean, and today we're with Jay Cormier of Off the Page Games, who's amazing, a friend of the podcast, has been a guest before, but today we're going to be talking about Core of Discovery, which I'm kind of stoked about. It's actually right over my shoulder right here, and so welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, in our Making Games series, we've been, we do a lot of tabletop games, a lot of RPGs, a lot of, we help a lot of people go to Kickstarter, and we even have the honor of you being our client for this as well. And you have a lot of BGG design credits. I mean, over 50 of them, and you have a lot of experience that you can share. I'm so excited to be able to dive into Core of Discovery because it's, you have a lot of kind of social deduction in your design credits. Mind Management has like hidden things, and Core of Discovery, when I first saw it, was very it stood out to me because it was a cooperative deduction game. And I always have a problem personally with social deduction because I tend to be very cutthroat, and I don't like that about myself. And so I try to run from games that involve, lying to my table mates and that kind of thing. But cooperative really stood out. And so anyway, the whole concept behind this Making Game series is I want to know what makes your product good. And because it takes a good product to be able to last as a company, and to develop the reputation that you've developed over the years as a prolific, trustworthy designer that makes good games is kind of a big deal. Like, you can't reinvent your reputation, right? It's like it goes up or it goes down with each product you make. And so that's kind of where I just like to go. And so how can you help everybody listening to this podcast to make their products awesome, like Core of Discovery? Is the intent. And so I don't know, you want to introduce yourself and just start rolling. Let's do this.
Hey, I'm Jay. I've designed a bunch of games. My mantra has always been about making games that are worthy of existing, if that's too blunt to say. Meaning, I've play tested, some of my games and also some games from other designers that are maybe newer in the scene or whatever. And I sometimes question, like, does this game need to exist? Is this game doing anything new or different, offering any new experiences or something that I can't get anywhere? Because it feels like it's just pushing cubes around or something that's very similar. It's very samey. And you put them together a bit differently, but if it's, to me, sometimes that's not enough for me personally. When I'm looking for making games and I want to stand out, and I make games that offer new experiences. So almost always have a co-designer, and I'm always challenging co-designers as well. Same thing of like, okay, this is all cool and it is kind of working, but what's the thing that makes it stand out? What's different about it? I'll give an example of in Grendel, which I didn't design. Actually, I was a developer on that one. And that one's just finishing up the Pledge Manager now. In that one, it was a really cool asymmetric game. That's what I signed from Sen From Lim and Alara Cameron, the designers. There's really every faction is playing a totally different mechanic on how they play, which is already cool. And that's maybe a cool enough hook. But I was like, it's not... It doesn't like jump off the page. It doesn't. That's a little nod because that's the name of my company, Off the Page Games. It doesn't jump off the table. It doesn't. It needs some more verticality or something. It's a very flat game, and I was kind of giving that to them, and like, well, we could put some buildings because it does take place in New York. I'm like, okay, but I want it just for fun. Like, it's got to have a functional use. And we, talked about some ideas of like, well, maybe it's like, they can jump over there or they can stand on it and that gives them better range and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, we could, but that still doesn't mandate the need of a building physical. Like you could just say you have +1 range when standing on this spot. So like we started brainstorming and then we got to this idea of like a piggy bank, like kind of like an El Grande type of thing, where what if you put these, tokens or something into a building and then you don't know what's in there and then you reveal it. It's very El Grande-esque. And we tried that for a bit and there was something interesting about it, but we didn't know when to reveal it. And we are trying to come up with different triggers of when to reveal this. And we had tracks and stuff, and that would, you'd forget to move the track up. And can we make it more integrated into the gameplay? And eventually, Sen had an idea of like, what if we could make it random? And we partnered with a guy named David Killing, who's also another game designer that's working on a bunch of games. And he's like an engineer of play. He's really a clever guy. And he came up with this system of having a seesaw inside the tower, this building, this constructed tower. And as you put tokens in, it starts to get heavier, 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 heavier. And then this thing that's sitting on at the other end of it goes thunk, and it'll fall. And like he made one for us, we tested it, and it was awesome. And it was like, this is it. This is now like already it had the kind of cool hook of asymmetric gameplay, but a lot of games have asymmetric gameplay. But on top of that, it has this really cool tower thing that's actually integral to the gameplay because you put these tokens that are of different weights and you choose what weight you want to put into the tower when you have an opportunity to put a token in there. And when it triggers, boom, that's when mayhem happens in that zone. There's 3 zones. So that's what I'm looking for in all my games that I'm a part of, whether as a publisher or as a designer. What can you do that's different, that's new, that adds something that you haven't seen before, that makes people want to turn their head and check it out?
Well, it's certainly paid off because Grendel has been voted the most anticipated game for 2026 by Tom Vassell of the Dice Tower. So it's definitely picked up some engagement there, which is great
Very
to
exciting.
see. Jay, how do comic books play a role in your company? I know Off the Page Games, the name and even your graphic design and logo is sort of based off a comic book. You've worked with many comic book creators producing games. I'm sure that helps because you're kind of tapping into an audience that already exists as well. So I'm sure that helps with your marketing. But maybe talk about the process of how comic books play a role within your game design, but then also in the marketing of your games.
So I've been a designer for 20 years or some 20 years, and then met up with Matt Kint, the creator of the comic book Mind Management. And, we met up at Gen Con just as people, like meeting, and we played games together because I loved his comics. He actually liked some of our games. So it was kind of like a shared high five funness. And he just said, just off the top of his head, he's like, man, it'd be so cool if there was like a game based on Mind Management. And Sen and I were like, could we make that for you? He's like, would you really? I'm like, yeah. It's like, yeah, it'd be awesome. Now, it took 5 years for us to figure out how to make it because we tried all sorts of different ways to figure it out and couldn't for the longest time, partly due to my standards of like, well, this is just like Pandemic, but with Mind Management put on top of it or something, And eventually we found it and made it, pitched it, got it signed. But then the publisher went under like 6 months later, and then we got the rights back to it. And I'm like, well, now what do we do? Got to find another publisher and all this kind of stuff. And it was Matt Kint. He says, well, why don't we just do it ourselves? He's like, you be the publisher and I'll do all the art. And I've got a graphic design background. And I'm like, well, for the longest time, Sen and I were always asked the question, like, just become a publisher. And we're like, we're not interested. No, thank you. Like, we're just designers. Let somebody else do that. But I had somewhat recently moved to part-time at my job to focus more on board games. So I'm like, I kind of could have the time to start doing this. And what better opportunity than literally one of my favorite comics of all time to turn that into a game and then publish it and make those decisions. I'm like, here we go. So I decided. And then at the time I was like, I wanted to have something to hang my hat on. And to so many board game companies are like called, something games. And like, we make games fun, or like just some sort of tagline that's like, could be any board game company. Like, it's hard to identify what company this game's from. Like, it could be any company could have made this game because it's a fun game or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so I really like something like restoration games. Ideally, their idea of restoring old games and making them new and modern again. That's a cool concept, and it's great in their name. I loved it. And so I'm like, well, what if all my games were based off of comic books? I don't have any connections. I don't know anybody in the comic book world, but I'm like, that sounds cool. This might be the only game I ever make. So let's just do that. So I was kind of flying by the seat of my pants a little bit in how I did it. And then came out, and that's kind of how it started. And then, Mind Management does well. It's doing really well. And so I'm like, okay, now I got to do a second game. What's going to be my second game? And I decide, I had one game. It was called Skirmishes with a friend of mine named Shad. And we had pitched it to a bunch of publishers, but it never really picked up. And I'm like, that's a cool game. I really like that game. And I don't got to find a comic for it. And I remember pitching it to a guy named Chris Schweitzer, who was a friend of Matt's, and we had played games with him. And I just pitched it to him because I liked his art. And I said, I don't think you have a comic that fits this, but would you want to like make a comic at the same time as I'm making this game? That was my pitch. I'm like, I don't know. What do you think? He's like, no, I'm swamped. He's like, but maybe this could fit in the world of Harrow County. He recommended Harrow County. Mm-hmm. And so like cut to the chase, you can see that it actually happened. And so we set up a meeting with Cullen and Tyler, the creators of Harrow County, made that. And so we're off to the races. And so, comics have become a huge part. That's all I've been doing so far is just making games based off comics. And I've been very fortunate from the fact that, yes, we have an audience that likes the comics, and then we have board game fans. And my marketing approach has always been to not really blast that out. I actually haven't been like, based on the hit comic, blah, blah, blah. And my reasoning was that I know that I've been to Gen Cons and whatnot, and I see a big banner that says, based on the hit comic and something, something. And I look at the ad or the banner, and I'm like, I've never heard of that comic, and I keep walking. Yeah. Right? Because I'm like, so I think it's a little superfluous to say that, because I think the fans of the comic will see the art and the title and go, what? Immediately they know it. So and it actually turns me off if I don't know the comic. And so I just put the game first and foremost. I'm like, check out this game, Mind Management, Hidden Movement, Harrow County, Asymmetric, blah, 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 and just talk about the game. Now I'm kind of getting caught up in it because now everybody knows that my company is all about comics, but in a good way, because they're all like, people ask me like, what's the next game you're going to do? Because I want to go read that comic. And people are loving that they have like this source of cool comics to read. Because so far, I'm, not tooting my horn. I'm tooting my horn of how good I'm choosing. But we're 4 for 4 on as far as like amazing comics that we're turning into board games. So yeah, that's a big part of my strategy, and it so far has been paid off. Yeah,
that's awesome. I really like what you said, because a lot of the time when I look at a major intellectual property, there are levels to this, right? Like Lord of the Rings, I would put right at the top, maybe things like very, very well known, you've got Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, stuff like that. Some people, just because it's Lord of the Rings, they'll buy it, right? And I think BGG's top 10 right now, the hotness, you've got 2 different Lord of the Rings things on there by 2 different companies. There's a reason that Lord of the Rings, just whatever it is going to help sell. But there are most IPs aren't quite as well known as that. And I find that people using the IP, the way I feel as a fan, when I hear about an IP that I just is a game that I've never heard of, like for example, Mind Management. I had no idea that was a comic.
Yeah.
I just knew that this is a game by a very prolific designer that is really good at what it does. And that I was brought in. But sometimes I think when people overemphasize the based on the wildly popular comic Mind Management by, Kenny Rogers, I don't know. Kenny Rogers do any comics?
He did a really good one, yeah.
That's awesome. So I feel like that is in a way them kind of low key saying the game is not very well play tested, but the theme is great. It's like maybe kind of rushed out there, because there are so many cash grabs that have come out that are of every IP under the sun, and maybe I'm a little bit cynical and maybe others aren't exactly like me, but I think your strategy, well, certainly it's paying off for you as a company.
I think so, yeah.
In the funding totals that you're making and everything too, right? And the following. So if you wouldn't mind, I guess, can you share more about the actual, so like you talked about it, but I would really love to revisit the component the what I would call table presence
Mhm.
of a game. Like Everdell has the big Ever tree,
course.
and it's like, wow, on the board, I want to walk up and look at it. I think going vertical is a really cool thing, that if a game can go vertical, it just looks different. A lot of people think about, being mechanically innovative and saying, oh, I'm gonna do a worker placement game mixed with deck building, and that's never been done before, or whatever. They mash two mechanics up that might not seem like they would go together. They find an innovative way for them to go together. But the actual like physical presence, so like Core of Discovery, I got the Kickstarter version and I busted it out, and it's got this beautiful wooden board with these wooden tokens, and the way that it looks is like, ooh, like it has like the missions will slide in to that wooden board, and it's very different. I don't have any other game on my shelf that does that. And so maybe you mentioned with Grendel like this cool little other mechanic. I would like to, how important is it to have some table presence, and why do you care so much about that?
I guess first and foremost, I am a gamer. I think everyone in this industry is, I imagine. And I've been doing that for even longer. I mean, everyone who's a game designer or game maker has been a gamer for longer than they've been a game designer or game publisher. And I know what I like. I love interacting with cool. Like, I look at something that's cool and weird and neat, and I'm like, I want to play with that. I want to see, how does that work? How does that impact gameplay? I'm drawn to anything that looks cool and weird. I'm like, what does that do? And I want to, so I'm always drawn to like any game, like, I don't know, there's a game called Turbo Kids where you have to wear a blindfold and you have to draw, and somebody has to guide your hand to the right, up, left, and you have to draw race around a track and avoid obstacles while somebody's guiding your hand. Like, that's just a weird experience. I love weird experiences in games, and so that's part of why I do that. And I think that so many people just want, it's just so attractive. Like for Harrow County, we were toying with different combat mechanisms. And at the first, when we first started doing combat in Harrow County, it was deterministic, which is just like chess. You move on to it and you capture it, and it's a done deal. There's no uncertainty or randomness to it. And that makes it a more puzzly game, but it didn't feel right with the IP. It didn't add any tension that a gothic horror comic should have. And so while like everyone else who ever does combat, I'm sure you go to dice. And so we started using dice. But combat isn't the main part of the game. It's like 1/4 of the game. And so the swinginess of dice meant that if you kind of whiffed on your 1 1/4 times, it really hurt. And so then we started adding all sorts of mitigation until a point where it was like, are we even using dice anymore? We're mitigating the heck out of it so that you can just ensure that you get a good roll or something. That didn't feel right. And then I had always loved Amerigo, which is a Stefan Feld game that had a cube tower. And I just love that concept, the cube tower. And I don't know how or why I thought that might be a cool. Maybe we're just brainstorming different ways to do combat. How else could we randomize something? And cube tower came up as an option. And so we started trying it, and it was wonderful because it kind of has a negative feedback loop or a catch-up mechanic built into the concept of it, because you put some cubes in, some of yours might get stuck, but then they'll come out later on. And so it was a really cool concept for combat. And failure in one actually didn't mean, it meant you could have more success in the future, which was really cool. And then as we were designing this cube tower, I said almost immediately, if you know the story of Harrow County, the tree in the story of Harrow County is the page 1 is a witch is hung up by a tree and then buried under that tree. And then the main character is born out of a hole in that tree. And we're like, oh, that'd be cool if this cube tower was a tree. And so I'm trying to think about making this cube tower standalone, just like in Amerigo, a cube tower. And then as we're designing the cover and thinking about what should be on the cover, I'm like, well, the tree has to be on the cover. I'm like, well, hold on a second. Can we make the cube tower in the box of Harrow County? And we're like, after some kind of really thinking about it and planning, we figured out a way. And then I can't, you can see, I have to move the camera a little bit there. You can see that there's an actual, hole in the box of Harrow County. So we actually figured out a way that you actually put the box on the table. Talk about table presence. The actual box is mandatory. You drop cubes. And I don't find that a gimmick. Some people might say, oh, that's a gimmick. I'm like, a gimmick to me, no offense, but Everdell that's just a gimmick because there's no functionality to that. It's table presence, but it's not mandatory that it has that elevation. You know what I mean? Whereas this is mandatory.
Hold cards. Right?
That's all. Yeah. Not that no knock against it. It's just that's a gimmick. This is not a gimmick because it's actually, I think, integral to the gameplay. I could have been standalone, sure, but I just think that's cool and unique. And it's nice to say it's the first time anyone's ever done that kind of thing in a box. So that's kind of cool. And then with with Core of Discovery, that one, can I tell the little story about how that came to be? Is that interesting?
Yeah, I'd love that.
Oh, okay. So Sen and I were on a call with Buffalo Games, and we had always been trying to partner with them on something. And we just kept missing each other, and things weren't really aligned, and like, nothing ever worked. But we had a call, and it was during the pandemic, and he said he was interested in a solo game. And he specifically said, I want a solo game about surviving on a deserted island, because that feels like a solo game. And right there on the call, I had this idea of like, what if it was a scratch game? Like you were scratching and exploring this deserted island, and there's all these like terrains. And I said, but the terrains all had logic rules about where they're located. Like some sort of epiphany of an idea, just like boom, boom, boom. And I'm like, that sounds cool. And immediately after the call, I made a sample of it. And I'm like, it was immediately super cool. I'm like, this is great. And so we developed that and pitched it, and it's out with them. And then Harrow County comes and goes. And then I'm like, well, what's my third game going to be? I'm like, I don't know. I'm not trying to figure out what to do. And I contact Buffalo Games. I'm like, are you doing anything with that game, that solo game? And they're like, no, the pandemic's over and we're not interested anymore. I'm like, can I have it back? I'm like, yeah, of course. So I take it back, but now I'm stuck with this. Like, well, what is this game? Like, what comic is this? And Sen actually posted on social media. He's like, what are some comics that are about surviving on a deserted island or exploring an island or exploring a planet or anything like that? Some exploring or surviving. And it was actually a girl named Trisha from Skybound. She just said Manifest Destiny. And I had never read it. And so I read it. As I do when most people recommend stuff, I'm like, well, I'll read it. And it was awesome. I'm like, this is amazing. And so I started adapting this little game into that. And then immediately I'm like, well, I don't want it to be a solo game because that's I'm not interested in making just a solo game. And so I figured a cooperative game would be the way to do it. But then had to figure out how to make it so that it was, interesting that there was different people. So obviously we have asymmetric character powers, and then we added gear eventually so that we have even more reasons. Like you can only do this on your turn. So you have relevance. You have, we're all brainstorming the puzzle, but on your turn, we have this thing we do. Now, some people love Core Discovery just as a solo game because it is the puzzle. I think, and that's totally fine. And I think there's some value in the 2, 3, or 4 player game because of what you add to the game, and the challenge is the timing. So now you have to time when to use your flint or your compass so that it times out right. Wait, before use your mortar pestle on your turn, because you're not going to get another turn before this thing is like, you have to time things out. So there's another thing you're juggling, which I think is interesting. The puzzle part is still the same about addiction. But then now I'm trying to get this away. I was still planning on doing a scratch game. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. And a game called Through the Line, I think it's called Through the Line. Have you heard that one?
But I've never played it, but I have heard of it.
Yeah, I don't think it's been delivered yet, but it was a Kickstarter game that was out about the time I was thinking about doing this. And it was a scratch game. And there was some feedback, because I talked to the creators, and they had some feedback about how, there was negative feedback about the environmental impact of a scratch-off game. About how disposable it is. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's possibly true. So I started thinking about like, okay, so what can I do if this is not a disposable scratch-off game? And I started brainstorming. I actually sat down with a manufacturer, and we started brainstorming all these different things. The first thing I thought of was those like travel bingo games where you like open these doors and close them and stuff like that. Or no, it was a slidey thing. There's slidey things. Yeah, that was the first one, was a slidey thing. So you slide it. And that was at first. Wouldn't that be cool? Like just to reset the game, you just tilt it this way and they all slide this way, right? And you set it down and then you just open these windows. That'd be so cool. The challenge we found with that is that door that's covering this hole, that door has to go somewhere. And so it's going to slide over into the next hole, or you have to have big, wide spaces between everything, to allow that door to hide between it. And it started making the board way too big for the 7x7 grid that we knew we needed for this gameplay from testing. And so we're like, oh, that doesn't work. And then the door, we thought like an advent calendar where you open a door, swings open, was interesting. But if you're sitting on this side, then you can't see over the door.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh man. And at this time also, we also had this other resource. They were just called at the time sun tokens, that you had to manually remember as you open a door to take a sun token and put it on the card as part of the timer. And that was just part of it. And it was something people forgot. And we were always having a tricky thing trying to remind people, like, don't forget to put a timer on there. And it was just something that wasn't baked into the flow. And so eventually when we came up with the idea of what it is now, of a board with holes, and you put all these little circle tokens that are dual layer, so they nest in there, like they sit kind of snug in there, that became the sun tokens. Like you take it off and you put it immediately. So it's part of the gameplay flow now, the loop. You just take it and you put it on the card. Now it's also part of your timer. The downside is, you have a 2-minute setup time, as you kind of have to spread these little tokens out and pop them into the holes and flip them upside down. So that's a 2-minute little setup time. But once it's set up, like you got an hour of, there's no more fuss or whatever. And I think it's the best gameplay experience we could have, given all the limitations of that we were looking at.
Very cool. Yeah. Once Upon a Line, by the way, is
what did I call it? Once Once Upon a Line. Yeah, right.
I was thinking of the 21 Pilots song, the line, from Arcane. But that's it. Yeah. So that's a really cool system. I think that one thing that I look at, I have a very small team. I have a team of 3 that I work with, myself and 2 others rather. And one of the things I've noticed, like with designers that are new, one guy's like brand new, started out as a volunteer with my Discord server and moved in. Now I've hired him to work on games, Deliverance and other games that I'm working on. But it's the most tempting thing is just to add another component. It's like, I want to add another mechanic to the game, or I want to do something, just little variants or whatever. And I'm going to add a new resource type, and or a track. I'm going to add one more track, and the track is going to be like,
or an
victory
event deck.
Points, and then
event decks are the crutch for many designers.
Yes, and so I'm like, okay, but or they'll be like, yeah, well, the event deck. There's actually a game I'm working on that has in essence an event deck, and it's like the enemy team is deck building against you, and there's a really cool kind of system. But then they're like, well, what if we do like an event deck that's for like phase 1, and then another one for phase 2, and then another one for phase 3, like. And then like the bad guys will be controlled different. Bad guys will be like, these are controlled by the first deck, and these ones are controlled by the second one. It's like, well, how could we do all of that, but just with one deck? Like, I don't want to use 3 decks. I want to use one, and I want all the things to happen off of the one. So that way there's like a third of the, piles that there would be.
I think the best example of that is Phil Walker Harding. If you look at any of his games are always about less components, less moving pieces, but the decisions and the cleverness is still remains. So he finds what is the essence of what's cool about the mechanic and just keeps that intact and makes it streamlined to that. It's very, very good.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that less is more, or maybe another way to describe it is deceptive simplicity is so hard to achieve in your game, where it's simple to activate. Like, one thing I really like about Core of Discovery, and I was sharing with you earlier, I've actually never played it myself, but I've opened it, looked at it, I know, and I've asked my wife, and she's like, it's like on the short list of games we're gonna play. We're going through Iridia right now, which is a beast of a game. But one thing I really loved is how the player board. So you have the board like that you kind of explained with the tokens. But the player board, it kind of explains the phases of the game. That's right. Not the player board, but there's like another community board with like 3 events on it.
Sure.
And then there's like there's the night phase, and then the
backpack.
Yes. And where you feed your people, and then events, you kind of reset the board and whatnot. But that is like a very simple, like, I do these things, then this, then that. And now I go back in like this easy circle that I can see, that also gets interacted with as you pull the sun tokens off and explore. And every piece feels like it belongs. There's nothing that's like out hanging off on its own after, as I'm doing the thing. And like you had kind of mentioned earlier, I forgot to move the cube up the track.
Hate that.
Or,
yeah.
And I think that's something
that's interesting. That came from the original version of this game. Wasn't that? It wasn't 3 cards per day. It was just an ongoing river of cards. So as you solved one card, you'd slide them over, flip over a new one, and slide them over, flip over a new one. So there was always, I think, 3 visible, but it was sliding over, and it was just kind of an unending thing. And then we kind of came up with this night-day system, and like, would be cool night. And we had like a token that sat after the third card and would get slide over with the other ones, you know. And what I liked about that version that we unfortunately lost in the current version is that you always got to see 3 cards ahead of you, always, even at night, even on the, you know. But what we lost is what we gained is the fact that we don't have this minutia, this fiddliness of sliding cards is very annoying. Of like this, especially when there's tokens on them and you're sliding things, and it was just it was kind of messy, and it didn't feel like it was hard. I don't know. There was always issues about the night day thing of figuring out where it was. So by just doing 3 cards, then you end, it feels very much like there's a bit of a crescendo to that. Like, and then you don't know what's coming tomorrow. It gave us new ideas for gear cards of things that you could, you know, peek at stuff that comes tomorrow so that you can prepare. And so that, and then there's an opportunity for nighttime where you draw a monster card. And that rule came out because as we were playtesting, we noticed there was some swinginess to the gameplay, where in one playtest, it'd be super hard and there was lots of monsters and it was a really hard game. And another game, they just managed to, just sometimes by luck and sometimes by deduction, managed to avoid all the monsters until they needed them. And it was very easy for them. And we're like, we don't like the easy part. How can we make it so that everyone's having a bit more consistent of an experience? And that became of like, what if at nighttime we have to draw a new monster? If there's no monsters in play, you have to draw a new monster. And we're like, yes. And that all of a sudden became part of the gameplay loop and had a benefit for us having the 3 cards. So that was just an interesting story about how that changed from one gameplay that had fiddliness to it and remembering to do things to now it's just like you're saying, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just do these things in this order, and it's all reset.
So Jay, you mentioned playtesting. I know that you have an entire website and even a course dedicated to playtesting called Fail Faster. And you even have a series on YouTube of how to start a board game company, which I think, you know, anyone listening to this, go check it out. It's phenomenal. It's really good. Kind of go step by step how to,
like, as you did it, right?
yeah, I did it. In hindsight, it's a bit hubris there, where it's like I called it how to start a board game company. I probably should have just called it how I started my board game company. I don't know if it's the way to do it. It's just the way I did it.
So I imagine you've playtested hundreds of thousands of times, most likely. Yeah. What are the kind of key things you've learned, and how do those things you've learned apply to Core of Discovery?
Just in playtesting in general?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this could be a 4-hour long podcast if you want, but some highlights are things like every single piece of feedback you get is feedback you get, and you have to accept it. It doesn't mean you have to implement it. It means you have to accept it. You have to appreciate it. You have to write it down in front of them so that they know that you are appreciating it, that their time, because your playtesters are gold. And the fact that I playtest with some newer designers, and as soon as they start getting defensive, it gets my back up. I'm like, come on. Like, why is this person playtesting here? He's here to help you and your game because he loves being part of the process, and they want to help you get your game better. And you're being defensive, even if you don't like their idea. That's just like one person said, gave feedback that he wanted, I think, more combat or something. And immediately the designer was like, no, we tried that. It doesn't work, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I kind of redirected. I'm like, why do you want more combat? It's like, well, I didn't feel like I could impact the other player's score. So maybe that way, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Is there other ideas that we could use to impact the other player's score? And that got us talking. So sometimes as a designer, you have to find the root cause, because sometimes I playtest with designers, which gives you some different type of feedback, and playtest with non-designers, just people. And sometimes the people will give you solutions, but they don't know all the ramifications of how that might impact a game design. And that's fine. But it means that you as a designer have to do more work. You have to then go underneath and like, okay, why are you recommending this solution? And it might be one of the ways to go to it, or maybe there's other ways to get to that solution. So that is part of my big thing. It bugs me to no end. I have a bi-weekly playtest event here at my house here. And when we're playtesting somebody else's game and we're giving feedback and they're not writing, I'll pause. I'm like, do you want us to wait till you get a pen and paper or something? Like, Like, write this down. Like, I just say, you got to write this down. He's like, and they're like, oh yeah, I got to write this down. Like, it's like, this is why we're playtesting, is for this moment right now, the feedback, so that, we all think we'll remember it because it's like we're here now and it seems so, of course I'll remember this, but you don't remember it all. You got to write it down, and it shows respect to your playtesters. So respect your playtesters, accept their feedback. And what I learned early on, well, it took me a while to learn it, was I would not just accept it, I would implement every feedback every time I playtested. And so I was changing my game every single time and then eventually I noticed, I'm like, well, this is now a game that was like 4 versions ago, because that person wanted this and this person wants, you know what I mean? Everyone wants different things. So at a point you have to make the game you want to make, but you have to, find the patterns in the feedback that you're getting.
Hey, Crowdfunding Nerds, it's Andrew Lowen, and I wanted to introduce you guys to the Crowdfunding Nerds Academy. If you don't know, we have a do-it-yourself course system that will teach you how to build, excite, and prepare a crowd to fund you on your launch day, and that is our goal. I have used these systems to help raise over $30 million for tabletop campaigns, over 200 tabletop crowdfunding campaigns since 2019. I've generated over $100 million through e-commerce sales using these processes. These courses teach you how to replicate our results. They're made for the small creator. Over 150 of those people were first-time creators. These courses contain hundreds of hours of podcast discussions and tons of details that are almost impossible to find on the internet. And they have been distilled into concentrated courses that you can absorb quickly. They are designed to generate results. We hold nothing back. Visit crowdfundingnerds.com/academy to learn more, or just Google search Crowdfunding Nerds Academy. Back to the show. When I developed Deliverance, it was my first time designing anything, and I was like, I want to make a game that is this deep exploration, almost like Diablo, where you descend into varying levels of the church, and it goes into the caves, and now you're in hell and whatever, and you're fighting Diablo down at the bottom of this 12 layers of map tiles. And it ended up being a game that had no, I remember the very first prototype I ever drew had stairs on every tile, and you could interact with the stairs. And I got rid of all that because it felt like Deliverance wanted to be like a skirmish game where you slayed demons and you were this epically powerful angel. And I wanted it so that if you pressed your strongest buttons, like if it was Street Fighter, you hit your heavy attacks or whatever, right? Your Scorpion, get over here, uppercut, and that's all you do, or jump kick, low kick. I wanted you to lose. So if you press your strongest button, you die. That was like one of the kind of core fundamental design things. And I realized all this other stuff that I'm trying to get players to do with that fits like my vision. It's not what players find fun. And the more I held on to it, I remember my wife is like my number one. I should listen to her all the time, because she's like, the first game was like 6 battles long, and she was like, this should be 2 battles. I'm like, let's make it 5. Let's try 5. And it's horrible. And eventually end game is 2 battles, because it's just like you've got to like warm up and get more power, and then you've got a boss fight, and that's the core of the game. It's like a lot more focused. And I feel like as a new designer, I went through that myself, where I was like, oh, I don't want to do it that way because, but then I started to kind of tap into what it is that you're suggesting by actually sitting down and playing other people's games and giving them feedback and, kind of experiencing a little bit of what I was giving, the medicine I was giving others.
It helps with your insight and your ability to cut through and find out some solutions. And sometimes just giving feedback to other people helps you in your game design. It's like, actually, that, and that I teach game design too at Vancouver Film School. I've been doing it for like 12, 13 years. And so I'm doing that all the time, is seeing all these very first time game designers designing games and giving them feedback. And it's old now, it's all secondhand to give feedback on these very fresh designs about try this, or how about this, and think about this. And it's like anything with experience. The more you do something, the better you get at it.
And so, Jay, where do you find your playing testers? Do you have you mentioned that you have a weekly group. Do you do anything online? Do you pay people to play test? Do you go to cons? How do you kind of develop a network of playtesting? So, I have a co-designer usually, so that's already, and generally we don't live in the same area, so that's usually two separate groups right there from that. And then there is the best thing I found to do, especially
because I moved to a new city when I started doing this, is going to game stores and asking them if they have a game design night, and the one did. And so every other Thursday I go and playtest game there. So that's great. And then I was doing a playtest here at my house with just my friends. But then I became friends with some of those people at the game design night and slowly started inviting some of those people over. And so now I have anywhere from like as low as 4 people to as many as like 18 or so people coming over playtesting all day on a Saturday or Sunday, all day and night kind of thing, and buy pizza and stuff like that. So I don't necessarily pay them because we're all designers and we all play test everybody's game. I try to make sure everybody gets their game in. So that's a big part of what I do. I do online tests with Off-Page Games through our ambassador program. So we have ambassadors that want to help us play test games in the back end, and usually through TTS, unless they want to, have a print and play, I can provide that. Sometimes that's impossible with games like Grendel because of the mechanical aspect of it all. But yeah, the biggest thing is going to game stores, finding out when they have their game design night. That's huge.
That's awesome. That's actually how I want to say my first public playtest was just walking into a game store with my game under my arm, and it was board game night, and I went and I played. I just met a group of people. The store owners are super cool. Like if it's game night, they want to help you find someone to play with or whatever. And I felt like it was preschool. Like the teacher introduced me to like a group of kids, and I got to play blocks with them, And I remember playing Mystic Vale. It was the first time I'd ever played a game. The card crafting system was really cool.
Yeah.
And then at the end, I was like, that was great. And I have a game. If you guys don't know what you want to play next, we could try this one. And they were like, okay. And they were all Satanists, all 3 of them. And and normally it's like whatever, right? But I bring out this game that's like, this is a Christian game. And they were like, okay, sure. Let's try.
And what phase was it? It was that the 2 battle system at this point, or
it was.
I
want to say it. Yeah, we got it down to 2 battles. It felt like it wasn't an embarrassment to show people anymore, and then I was willing to play it. And they had great feedback. They were some of my biggest supporters. Like every time that I came in, they were like, "Hey, what's the latest iteration? Can we play that?" And
that's great.
It was like, whoa, you'd figure.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's funny because I normally don't advocate for people separating other fans of their games by religious affiliation, but it's kind of a funny thing on, with my fans. You've got people that are on all the different spectrums of religiosity, I guess. And but the feedback was really fun. But yeah, that was a huge kind of moment for me to get in there, and I didn't feel like I was being rude, because I could step in and play and just kind of step into their world and be a part of it. And then when it came time, I offered and was like, hey, you guys want to try? If not, then it's okay.
It is the biggest bottleneck of game design is playtesting. So you have to have a plan. You have to have a process for how to do it. So I get to playtest guaranteed at least those 2 live things, but they're every other week. So that's 4 times a month. That's not enough as a publisher to play. So that's where I'm playtesting. The rest is online, whether it's with the designers or my Discord community. Off-Page Games has a Discord that people can join if they want to playtest. We're welcoming anybody that wants to help playtest. It's great.
I feel like playtesting is largely like brute force. You keep on playtesting just until it starts working.
It's weird and especially a game. I remember like with Grendel, because it had so much asymmetry, and you want to kind of keep track of stats of like, well, let's make sure it's balanced so this side isn't more powerful than this side. But as soon as you tweak one thing, like all previous tests are out the window because of the asymmetry. Well, and I don't know how this now works with this one little tweak. Now we have to balance, asymmetry. I don't recommend it from a game design perspective because of the amount of testing you have to do with this is way higher.
I had a question about pricing. So when you are making a game, do you think my people will handle a price like this high? And so the component types that I can include are things like this, that, or the other. Like if it's $100 game, you can put miniatures in it, or if
I know, I got to get better at this. But I'm and my graphic designer, who's done graphic design for dozens of games before mine, he says I'm backwards to everybody. Like I do it the other way around, and I shouldn't be, and I got to be better at this. Whereas I make the game it has to be. This is the game. and it has to be this. And then what's the price? Well, it's this. I'm like, oh, I guess that's the price. And so I wish there's some hindsight things I wish I'd done. Like, for example, Mind Management cost $60 US. And I think if I would have taken the shift system out and maybe added that as a standalone not standalone, but a separate expansion-y thing, I could have got down to $40. Now, would that have made it more successful? You know, would more people have played Mind Management because the barrier to entry is a lot lower, easier to buy? Maybe that's the thought, right? It could have really took off a lot bigger. Same with Harrow County. It came with 3 factions plus a 4th as a 3rd player. Hester, this witch who's buried under the tree, you could play as her as a 3rd player in this 2-player asymmetric game. And I remember having the conversation with the creators of like, should we include her? Should we not? Should it be extra? And in the end, obviously, we decided to include her because it's part of the story. She's like the main part of the story. But in hindsight, I still wish I would have kept that separate to keep it as here's a 2-player game. And now here's a 3rd-player expansion of Hester. That would have been way better and kept, again, that price down from $65, maybe down to $50 or $55 to keep that out. So I'm starting to learn that. That's why Core Discovery is a $40 game and when it came out. And I think we've had to increase the price because of tariffs, unfortunately. But it was started out as a $40 game because I'm like, let's just do 2 chapters. And we had 6 chapters totally planned and figured out. I'm like, here, at one point it was like, this is the game, 6 chapters. I'm like, no, I'm not doing this mistake again. Let's do just 2 chapters, fauna and flora. So you got some variety in there, but then we'll release each other one as its own expansion. And I think that was, in hindsight, I still think that one was the right decision. And then same with Grendel, we have a 5th faction, the Press, and we took them out and put them as an expansion because it's not needed to play the core game at all. And it's a cool expansion. It's cool, not a 5th player, but a 5th faction to play as to mix in however you want. So that's kind of my plan going forward, is to try to make the game the core game, put that as the main game and do everything else as expansions if there is anything else.
Yeah. I had maybe like one quick follow-up on pricing. I have kind of the way that I think about benchmarks in pricing, you know, like $50, $100, you know, there are lots of different benchmarks. What are for you that change consumer behavior? So like you know, $5 thing could be right up at the register, and I might just add it, you know, if it's a pack of gum or something, I might just spontaneously add it to my order, or like Icebreaker's gum or whatever, you know. But you know, maybe like Star Realms could be there. It's like the $12 game, you know, quick and easy to grab. But $20, you know, when it comes to crowdfunding in particular, there are price points that cause people to think a little bit more, or, you know, and we've talked a little bit about pricing and how you've priced your products. What do you think, like, what are the major benchmarks for you as far as price go?
My philosophy for going to crowdfunding is that even though I had that $39 game, and I remember what's his name, Bowser or something like that, Bauer, you know him, and he reviews
Bowser's game design,
and he reviews Kickstarter pages.
Yeah,
and I always get a hoot out of his opinions and his approach to it. He's just very blunt and really, really good. I think it's really neat. And I remember him reviewing the Core Discovery page because this is right at the top, $39. He's like, wow, this is great, $39. He's going in. Then we had a deluxe that stepped it up to $59. He's like, yeah, I want that wood bits. And then we went to the ultimate, and it was $129. And he saw that had all these expansions that, you know, normally would cost $15 a piece, and 4 of them. He's like, oh yeah, I'm in. He's like, and then he goes, wait, I came in at 40 and I'm leaving at 130. He's like, that's awesome. He's like, bravo, because I don't feel like I was sold that. I felt like I wanted that. And so part of my strategy is always to have, obviously on the crowdfunding circus, I mean, FOMO can be used as a negative connotation, a negative word, but there's not necessarily FOMO, but you want to create a sense of demand and urgency that, hey, you should get this now because you might not get it later. There might not be a chance again. And so I've made all my deluxeified, you know, versions of the game a crowdfunding exclusive, so that if you want this thing, this is the only way to get it. Is the deluxe. And so far that's been working well because the aftermarket sales of these have been really high. So people trying to buy them afterwards has been high. So that's helped me in future Kickstarters where people know now, like, okay, get it now because it's going to be worth something later or harder to get later. and but still try to find like Core Discovery, the $39 version, so that when we get to the retail, that they can buy a boatload of them and have them in their store at $39. And then I'm trying something new that I saw Helena Capel do with Kids Table Board Game. She did this with, I can't remember the order, so I might say it wrong, but I think it was like Cafe Barras and Diced Veggies or something. Like, I don't know. One of them was coming out, like Kickstarted. And then in the Pledge Manager, she announced, I think Cafe Barras, hey, our next game is here. It's called Cafe Barras. And I don't know what the price is, so I'm just going to make it up, $25 or something. And you can get this without any extra shipping if you want to add it to your pledge. It's an extra. I'm like, oh, cool. And she's found some good success in that because it helped. It was like just a bit of money in advance to help pay for the print run, of the thing. I'm like, that's a cool idea. So I did that with a game called The Creeps, and circling all the way back, if you remember the beginning of one of my stories, to Chris Schweitzer, who I pitched Harrow County to as a first. Well, it wasn't called Skirmishes at the time. And he passed, but I was always kept wanting to partner with him. And so I had a game. I'm like, I think this could fit in the Creeps world. It's a comic he'd done, and I really enjoyed. And he agreed, and we made it. And so that was my $25. I think a 20 on the Pledge Manager, but 25 in retail or something like that. And we added that to the Pledge Manager for Grendel, and so which is I think just about to wrap up at the end of this month. And so that's another strategy I have to try to get these lower price point ones. Part of that is from going to conventions and selling games. Having only $60 plus games is hard to move items to sell a lot, because that's a certain customer base at live events. And so I wanted to have some $20, $25, $30 games available as well to sell, to help try to have a bit more traffic selling those things.
So right now, Core Discovery is on Kickstarter, and there's a link in the show notes. Do you plan to also sell the Manifest Destiny comic books in certain pledges? Is that something that can either an add-on, or is that something that can be added in the Pledge Manager later? Because I kind of see that there's sort of a natural relationship here that you've done between the games and the comics and so on. It's like, oh, actually, this is a cool game. I'm actually interested in the comic. And then it's like a great opportunity in the actual Kickstarter to pick up the comic and then, as increase that order value of your pledges.
I have tried to do that with every comic that I've worked with. Harrow County is the only one where it worked, where they ended up giving me digital codes so people could download Harrow County, the whole series, and that was pretty cool. But I haven't been able to get that since. The challenge with doing the comics is either they have to do a whole nother print run, which maybe the comic company is not wanting to do right now, or they have to spend a boatload of money shipping a boatload of comics from here to Europe to China to Australia, and that's just going to eat up all the to get it to all the hubs, unless I just say it's only available to people in America, which I don't think is fair. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's a bit of a frustrating thing that we can't figure a way to make that logistics unless we're printing at the same time a whole new batch of comics, but nobody's interested in doing that because they have their own supply already. You know what I mean? So it's a frustrating thing that it seems like it makes sense, but I'm not the publisher of the comic, so I don't have any control over getting that out. Yeah, I wish I could.
Do you ever think you'll make your own comic and then you'll have the basis for a comic print run alongside a game?
Are you reading into my future? So I had a video that came out at the beginning of the year about like what 2026 is all about for Off the Page Games. And there is a game that we've designed that doesn't have a comic it's based on. And so we hired a comic book writer and a comic book illustrator to make a comic for that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
really coming out later this year. Yeah.
Do you think that it would be like too on the nose for you to have a game that looks like you're playing inside of a comic book?
I think so. I think it is. Yeah. Because then that feels like super, like you said, for my management, you didn't know about the comic or whatever. It was just a game. You want to play the game. But as soon as you make it overtly about comics, then the Venn diagram is shrinking or getting further apart or something. So it's just comic book fans.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now, a question about reviewers. A lot of people wonder, how many reviewers do I need for my crowdfunding campaign?
All of them.
And yeah, so I'd love for you to talk about your strategy a little bit. Like, you have limited number of prototypes, right? Let's just say, you can't send out 150 prototypes, right? What do you do?
I think for Grendel, I made 12 prototypes, which is a lot.
Mhm.
And my strategy is I always keep two. One, because I'm going to be demoing, and that other one I've just found every single time that I've needed an extra one for some reason. Like one time it was like Shut Up Sit Down wanted a copy of something. I'm like, yep, you can have it. You know what I mean? Like I just have one just in case. And so that's expensive to have one just in case, but that's now going forward. I've always found it useful. And my strategy is very much heavily favoring content creators in my marketing plan. I find so much value in them in an ongoing value. So obviously you have to lay out all the different needs you have on your campaign from, okay, how many playthroughs I have, especially when you have asymmetry in your game. Do you want how many playthroughs do you need to show off all the different factions or what have you? And then you need how to play videos. You need playthrough, how to play, and maybe just overviews. But you need a different approach. Sometimes written reviews in addition to videos. So you just need to cover all your bases. I send 10 of them out, and then I have them send those 10 to another 10 midway through. So if I can get it to them 2 to 3 months before the campaign goes live, give them a month and a half, and then ask them to send it on to the next reviewer. And not only that, we're still to this day sending out copies of Grendel to more reviewers right now, even though the late pledge is almost wrapped up. Like it's, you know what I mean? Like it's just, you keep sending them on. And so the value in this is multiple fold. Like yes, you got stuff on your Kickstarter page. That's pretty important. People want to see, well, what's a playthrough like? What's a demo? What's this? That's important. How to play, all that stuff. But also their audiences are getting pinged on it and now seeing that content on their channels. But it's also making these content creators aware of this game. And when they're doing things like most anticipated lists, for example, Tom never played Grendel. He stopped by, I think it was Gamma last year, and I showed it to him, and he's like, "Oh, this looks cool." And so, in that case, I didn't send it to him, but in other cases, other people they add your game to lists because they're aware of it, whether it's most anticipated or cool art or cool covers or most scary themed games for Halloween. Like using content creators, sometimes you get that's free advertising once they know about your game. And then they add you to these, lists of games of whatever they are. That I just love it. We got Core Discovery got on a bunch. Best use of IP from Dice Tower, best artwork, and most surprising game from 2025. So just extra advertising from just from partnering with these people.
That's awesome. And do you divide across people that will write a review on like Board Game Geek and then YouTube and other things too? Like how would you recommend doing that?
I mean, I'm trying to
care at all about anything.
Yeah. We keep track of it. We have our own internal content creator list of people that have reviewed for us, what their channels are, what their, views are and all this stuff. And not that we're only targeting bigger ones, because I do like targeting smaller ones, but I like targeting smaller ones that do good quality. I'll be like, that's a really, like, they put a lot of effort into their B-roll and stuff. Like, I want to partner with them again because that was really good. So I'm not just looking for the big ones, although you have to go after the big ones as well. Mm-hmm. But so it's not that selective. But I'm just making sure that we're partnering with people that show off our product the best in best light, like with good quality. Mm-hmm. People who do like one take and just hold the game up and then they'll move the camera physically down or something like that's fine, I guess. But I'm looking for other things, and I'll definitely look at trying to get more into TikTok. There's some people that have like big TikTok presence that I have no presence on TikTok. And if that's all they do, like Grant Lyon does has a big presence on TikTok as well as YouTube. So that's huge, trying to get on that,
And what about paying for reviews and things?
Yeah.
What is your policy?
Previews, right? You never pay for a review. Pay for a preview for sure, because that's a value for you. Paying for rules explanation, demos, all this kind of stuff. That's fine, and you have to pay for it. And so, my budget is usually $7,000 or more just on content creators. Mm-hmm. Setting that out. That's not counting how much it costs to make the samples, because that's like $100 to $200 a pop to make it a game.
Would you
go ahead?
Would you ever do your own videos of a playthrough or a rules explanation? Is that something you'd also do in-house just to add to the kind of content that's being produced?
I did one for the one that's on now, Core Discovery Duo, which is a brand new game that is based on the Core Discovery game, but now it's a 2-player game, which some people are like, well, Core Discovery already is a 2-player game. This is a totally different, unique, different game where instead of having a map that you're exploring and figuring out where things are, you're making the map together with your partner using deduction, because you know some rules and he knows some rules or she knows some rules, and there's some communal rules you both know, and you're trying to place cards that are terrain types, and you're trying to create the map. And that whole gameplay came about because before in Core Discovery, when I was the one that actually had to make the maps to test, and I couldn't even test the game for the longest time because I made the maps. I'm like, what's this game like? Until we hired somebody to make a program to create the maps for us, and then I could finally play the game. It was such a weird experience to not be able to play test your own game. And but I just remember making the maps was a fun puzzle, and I would get to it. I'm like, I can't fit this in anymore. I got to backtrack a few because I need to fit in another one of these in here or something like that. And it was a really fun puzzle to even just make a map. That's how Core Discovery Duo came to be.
That's fantastic. I was actually going to ask about that. You know, how you kind of pair a game like Core of Discovery, which is big and cooperative and already 2-player, into a duo experience. Was a time factor another one of your major considerations for Duo? Like, you wanted Core of Discovery. Core of Discovery is a little bit of a longer experience. You wanted it to be Duo to be shorter, or
it wasn't. That wasn't one of the reasons or goals in starting out. But yeah, I think there is definitely the gameplay had to last only a certain amount of time because eventually it gets too long in tooth, and so we had to figure out what that was. And I think some of the first playtests were longer, and you had to create the entire 7x7 grid and all this stuff, and it was too much. And so yeah, this what we ended up with, which is a nice 30 minutes if you're quick, 45 maybe for normal.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Well, I'm super excited about the Duo. I'm a sucker
it's
for.
So cool.
You know.
It's such a neat experience. It's kind of got that Sky Team feel to it, where it's like you can't talk about certain things. You know what I mean? That it's just really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. Then Core of Discovery live on Kickstarter, or you want to do the thing, Sean?
Yeah, I have one more follow up. Jay, or maybe right now, what's your favorite game?
Oh, I mean, I definitely am a cult of the new type person, and I like seeing what's the hottest thing. But for me, it's always again about the cool mechanism or cool news. What does this do? How does that work in the game? I'm very curious about it. But an old standby that I go to for when people ask me that is it used to be Tikal. I haven't played it in the longest time, but boy, am I so looking forward to the new reimplementation that they did crowdfunding for last year, and it may be coming out this year, hopefully. With all blinged out, but not only is it just blinged out version of Tikal, but Kiesling and Kramer redesigned, and you flip it over and it's got a whole new version, a new modern way to play the game that looks amazing and cool, and I can't wait to try it, because that is referencing something else we talked about earlier, has very strong Indiana Jones vibes to that game.
That's awesome. Oh, wow, cool. So now if you could ask, maybe as coming in for a landing here, if you could get people that are listening to this podcast to learn one thing about Core of Discovery, what would you tell them? Like, what is the coolest thing about Core of Discovery?
I mean, either it's the fact that it's Lewis and Clark exploring America, but it's full of monsters. That's just a cool thematic hook. You're like, oh, that's interesting, because it's this alternate history, which is really cool. And two, somebody once explained and said, it feels like I'm playing like a 1980s role-playing video game. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, like a Zelda game where you're walking around a map, you're finding, you're exploring different areas and learning about new areas. And then you got a backpack, and then you're fighting monsters. And I'm like, yeah, I guess it does kind of feel like that, especially like you're moving around, exploring and stuff like that. It has that kind of survival and an exploration, but mixed with a strong dose of deduction. That's
awesome. Wow. Well, I am super excited that we have you on our podcast, and excited for Core of Discovery. I know it's going to be a hit with everybody this second time around. I mean, it's I'm in for Duo, so we're at least dropping our support in more ways than one on this one. But thank you for joining us, and I guess follow or check out Core of Discovery on Kickstarter.
Yeah, do it, and follow Off Page Games on any social media platform with Off the Page Games is the tag.
Very good, very good. And do it with the jungle theme of Table Tone. See you on the next episode, nerds.
See ya.
Hey, Crowdfunding Nerds. If you're looking for an awesome fulfillment partner for US shipping, you should really consider Bridge Distribution and Fulfillment. I personally use them. I've used them for multiple projects. They do such a great job. They also can fulfill Amazon orders and get you prepped for Amazon and their warehousing team. I have been so happy using Bridge Distribution. I'm really proud that they're sponsoring us. If you reach out, bridgedist.com, that's bridgedist.com, let them know we sent you.